Ramses II, often called Ramses the Great, ruled Egypt for more than 60 years, and his public image was all about his physical strength. He came to the throne in his 20s, already hardened by training as a charioteer and warrior prince. Reliefs at temples like Abu Simbel show him holding a massive bow drawn to full extension, standing tall in his war chariot, charging directly into enemy lines. His most famous test of strength came at the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BC. Ramses fought his way out at the head of a small band of soldiers, likely personally driving his chariot into the melee. That choice required stamina, agility, and the kind of muscular conditioning developed through years of archery practice and chariot handling. Even in his late 80s, he projected an image of vitality, commissioning enormous statues that depicted him as eternally youthful and powerful. His mummy, discovered in 1881 and later studied in detail, shows a body around 5 feet 7 inches tall with broad shoulders and a long, well-built frame. His joints and spine show the wear of someone who lived a physically active life. Ramses II wasn't jacked in the modern bodybuilding sense, but for his time he embodied the ideal of a warrior king, broad-shouldered, visibly strong, and capable of fighting at the front. Leonidas I was not unique among Spartan kings in having a warrior's physique. By law and custom, Spartan royalty went through the same agoge training as every other boy. This meant beginning at the age of 7 with running, wrestling, spear drills, and harsh conditioning. Food was rationed deliberately to keep the body lean and strong. The result was explosive power suited to shield formations and close combat. By adulthood, a Spartan male was expected to serve as a full-time soldier until at least the age of 60. Kings were no exception. Spartan kings ate, trained, and fought with their men, and their authority depended in part on being physically capable of leading in person. Historical estimates suggest Leonidas was likely in his 50s or early 60s when he fought at Thermopylae in 480 BC. Surviving to that age while still serving as a frontline commander suggests lifelong physical training. Heavy bronze armor, a large hoplon shield weighing 15 to 20 pounds, and a spear around 7 feet long demanded both strength and stamina to use effectively over days of combat. Leonidas would not have been a bulky figure by modern standards, but would have displayed the muscular, hardened frame of a man shaped by decades of military labor. Alexander the Great demanded that his body keep pace with his ambitions. He marched with his soldiers across thousands of miles of terrain, mountains, deserts, and river valleys, covering distances that required walking or riding long hours in heat and cold. Ancient accounts emphasized that he ate sparingly, endured the same rations as his troops, and often went without sleep. His body type, as described by contemporaries, was compact and muscular. Macedonian warfare revolved around the sarissa, a pike over 13 feet long, which demanded upper body strength and control to use effectively in formation. Alexander also led cavalry charges in person, wearing bronze armor and carrying weapons that together could weigh 50 pounds or more. Surviving multiple wounds, including a chest injury from an arrow that nearly took his life in India, demonstrates both toughness and recovery ability. Ancient sources describe Julius Caesar as tall for his time, well-built, and possessing remarkable physical endurance. When pirates captured him as a young man, he was so physically intimidating and confident that he convinced them to increase his own ransom because their initial demand was insulting to someone of his stature. Julius Caesar spent decades personally leading from the front lines in some of the most brutal military campaigns in ancient history. Caesar's physical presence was part of his political power. This wasn't a culture of soft politicians. Romans respected leaders who could personally fight. When he crossed the Rubicon, he wasn't just making a political statement. He was betting that his battle-hardened body could back up his ambitions in civil war. His veteran legions followed him partly because they'd seen him bleed alongside them in Gaul, Britain, and Germany. Even his assassination required 23 senators with daggers because no one there dared take him on alone. Even still, he fought back his attackers, but ultimately lost his life. Charlemagne was the father of Europe, but didn't have a dad bod. He was a towering physical giant. He was said to stand at a height of 7 times the length of his own foot, in an era when the average man was just 5'6". Charlemagne was essentially the medieval equivalent of a professional athlete ruling an empire. His biographer Lionheart described him as having a broad and strong body, with exceptionally long legs and a powerful neck. When scientists examined his remains in the 19th century, they confirmed he was a physical specimen that would have dominated any room he entered. His daily routine was intense, swimming in natural hot springs, hunting massive wild boar and deer, and practicing swordplay. But here's where things get incredible. This absolute unit spent over 30 years personally leading and fighting in an estimated 54 military campaigns across Europe. We're talking about a man who, well into his 60s, was still mounting his warhorse in full armor for battles. Even in his palace at Aachen, he maintained a rigorous physical regimen that kept him battle-ready well into old age. Richard the Lionheart was essentially a medieval super soldier whose pure physical dominance on the battlefield let him become the ultimate warrior king of the Crusades. Standing tall with the build of a natural-born fighter, Richard possessed what contemporary chroniclers described as extraordinary physical strength and an almost supernatural ability with weapons. Muslim chroniclers described Richard as fighting with the strength of multiple men, cutting through enemy ranks like a human battering ram. During the Battle of Jaffa in 1192, he fought so ferociously that enemy soldiers began fleeing rather than facing him directly. His physical conditioning was extreme even by medieval standards. Richard could fight in full mail and armor for hours in the blazing Middle Eastern heat, wielding his massive sword with a strength that terrorized opponents. He once reportedly killed a lion with his bare hands, hence the nickname. Though this might be legend, but the fact that people believed it shows how physically intimidating he was. The Persian chronicler Rashid al-Din portrays Genghis Khan as tall, with a robust chest and a strong build. Life on the Mongolian steppe forged functional athletes. From youth, Temujin, his birth name, rode horses daily, often covering 60 to 100 miles in a single stretch. He learned to shoot a composite bow from the saddle, a skill requiring tremendous back and arm strength. These bows could draw up to 100 to 160 pounds of force, which would require his massive tree trunk arms. Wrestling was another part of nomadic culture, and Genghis almost certainly competed. These matches focused on throws and grips, demanding a thick, powerful torso. Unlike many rulers, he did not withdraw from combat as he aged. Well into his 50s and early 60s, he personally commanded in the field. Sources describe Genghis Khan actively commanding campaigns in his 50s and 60s, requiring the endurance to lead long campaigns across Central Asia and China. Henry VIII was 6'2" with a muscular frame that contemporaries described as godlike. But this wasn't just impressive height. Henry was a legitimate multi-sport athlete who dominated every physical competition of his era. In 1520, at the Field of Cloth of Gold, the 29-year-old Henry personally wrestled King Francis I of France, and won decisively, throwing the French king to the ground so hard it reportedly bruised Francis's ego permanently. Even his famous jousting accident in 1536, which many historians believe changed his personality, happened because Henry was still personally competing in the most dangerous sport of his era at the age of 44. The fact that he survived being crushed by an armored warhorse while unconscious for 2 hours shows just how physically robust he was. Before age and injuries caught up with him, Henry VIII was essentially a 6'2" Renaissance athlete who could have dominated any physical competition while simultaneously running one of Europe's most powerful kingdoms. Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden earned the nickname the Lion of the North, and much of that image came from the physical presence he carried on the battlefield. Born in 1594, He was unusually tall. First-hand accounts noted his imposing stature, commanding frame, strong presence, and deep voice. His physical conditioning was legendary even by military standards of the era. Adolphus could march with his troops for days across the brutal German countryside, then immediately engage in hand-to-hand combat without showing fatigue. Swedish chronicles describe Gustavus leading charges and fighting actively in battles like Breitenfeld and Lutzen, cutting through enemy ranks with his massive sword and maintaining the stamina to fight multiple engagements in a single day. The most incredible part? Adolphus was doing this while completely transforming how wars were fought. He created the first truly mobile army in European history, pioneering combined arms tactics that wouldn't be perfected again until World War II. He was literally inventing modern warfare while personally crushing opponents in single combat. George Washington had a body that contemporaries compared to a professional athlete. When he was measured for a suit in 1759, his chest was recorded at 44 inches and his waist at 36, proportions close to what modern tailors would call a V-shape build. For the 18th century, those measurements were extraordinary. His height and musculature translated directly into his horsemanship. Multiple eyewitnesses describe him as the best rider they had ever seen. Thomas Jefferson wrote that Washington was the best horseman of his age and the most graceful figure that could be seen on horseback. Riding powerful war horses into battle requires immense leg and core strength. He also had unusual hand strength. Surviving accounts say he could break a walnut between his thumb and forefinger, not his palm, a feat of crushing grip power. As a young man at Ferry Farm, George Washington was said to have hurled a stone clear across the Rappahannock River, over 250 feet wide, an anecdote often cited as proof of his unusual strength. Shaka Zulu was an African warrior whose contemporary accounts describe as tall, well-built, and remarkably handsome. European traders and missionaries who met him reported a man of intimidating physical presence, broad shoulders, powerful arms, and legs like tree trunks, developed through decades of barefoot running across the African plains. His nephew later described him as having the body of a lion, with hands so strong he could crush a man's wrist in greeting. The man's strength was legendary throughout the region. Zulu oral traditions describe Shaka as personally taking down a leopard with his bare hands, grabbing the animal by its throat and breaking its neck. He carried the ikuwa, a short stabbing spear he introduced to replace traditional throwing spears, which required powerful shoulders and arms to use effectively in the crush of close combat. Shaka personally set the standard for his regiments, training them to run up to 50 miles barefoot in a single day, while carrying shields and weapons. He often marched with them, showing that he could keep pace. His build was lean but heavily conditioned. Strong legs from constant movement, a hardened core from shield and spear drills, and scarred hands from fighting. Even after establishing himself as king, he joined battles directly, using both physical force and fear to dominate. Abraham Lincoln's physique stood out at an age when most Americans were smaller and less robust. He was 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed around 180 to 200 pounds, giving him a tall, lean frame that contemporaries described as powerfully built. Decades of farm labor, splitting rails, hauling logs, and plowing fields gave him strong shoulders and a crushing grip. As a young man, Lincoln gained a local reputation as a wrestler. According to records preserved in county histories and eyewitness accounts, he fought hundreds of matches and lost only 1 or 2. His style emphasized leverage and strength, and he was said to be able to lift opponents by their necks and toss them aside. And one neighbor recalled that Lincoln could hold an axe at arm's length by the very end of the handle without letting it drop. Visitors to the White House noted his firm handshake and unusually long reach, and soldiers who met him described him as tall, muscular, and as strong as a bear. His wiry build may not have matched modern ideas of bulked muscle, but for the 19th century frontier, it was the ideal combination of endurance, agility, and raw power. Theodore Roosevelt was one of the clearest cases of an American president who actively built himself into a physically powerful figure. As a child, he was frail, plagued with asthma and poor health, and doctors doubted he would live long. Roosevelt refused that fate. In his teens, he undertook what he called the strenuous life, throwing himself into boxing, weightlifting, and outdoor activity until his body caught up with his determination. By the time he entered Harvard, he was broad-shouldered and strong enough to compete as a light heavyweight boxer. Classmates remarked on his stamina and toughness in the ring, where he fought regularly and was known for his powerful right hand. Later, as governor and president, he continued to spar with professional fighters and wrestlers. One match in the White House left him with a permanently damaged eye. He also trained in judo under Master Yoshiaki Yamashita, a rare pursuit for an American world leader at the time. Roosevelt relished feats of endurance that proved his toughness. At his Dakota ranch in the 1880s, he rode horseback for 100 miles in a single day, slept outdoors in sub-zero temperatures, and once tracked and captured a group of horse thieves, bringing them back to town at gunpoint after days in the saddle. Even in his 50s, he hiked mountains, rode canoes, and boxed until he was drenched in sweat. Born in 1913, Gerald Ford grew up playing multiple sports and eventually became a star center on the University of Michigan football team in the 1930s. At 6 feet tall and around 195 pounds of solid muscle, Ford had the broad chest and powerful build needed to play in the trenches of college football's roughest era. He was good enough that both the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions offered him professional contracts, something no other U.S. president has ever achieved. Ford's physique carried over into his military service. During World War II, he served as a naval officer in the Pacific, working on aircraft carriers where long hours, heat, and constant drills required stamina and strength. Shipmates later recalled his fitness and energy, and he developed a reputation for calm leadership under physically demanding conditions. Even decades later, Ford maintained his strength. Secret Service agents noted that he continued to lift weights and could bench press his own body weight well into his 70s. His athletic background also gave him unusual balance and quickness for a man his size. That quickness may have saved his life twice in 1975, when he dodged assassins' gunfire in California with the reflexes of someone who had spent years on a football field. Among modern leaders, Ford was one of the very few who could credibly have competed as a professional athlete, and he carried that athletic strength with him for the rest of his life. Vladimir Putin is one of the best documented cases of a modern head of state who built his public image around physical strength. By his teens, he was training daily in Sambo, a Soviet martial art, and judo, eventually earning a black belt in both. In 1976, he became Leningrad's judo champion at 23 years old, and contemporaries described him as a compact, muscular fighter with excellent balance and explosive throws. Around 5'7" and 165 to 170 pounds, Putin is not tall, but his build has always been dense and athletic. Even after joining the KGB and later entering politics, he kept training on the mats. In 2012, the Kodokan Judo Institute in Japan awarded him as an 8th Dan black belt, one of the highest ranks in the sport, though this recognition was more honorary than competitive by that time. Photos and videos of Putin horseback riding shirtless, swimming in icy Siberian rivers, or demonstrating judo throws with younger athletes were circulated globally. Russian media often exaggerated his feats, at one point claiming he could leg press 840 kilograms, 1,850 pounds, a number that is almost certainly fiction. But the underlying reality is that Putin's body was, and remains, far more athletic than that of most world leaders. Khaltmaagiin Battulga wasn't just president of Mongolia from 2017 to 2021. He was a legitimate world champion martial artist, making him arguably the most personally dangerous world leader in modern history. Battulga is squat and powerful, with a thickly muscled neck and cauliflower ears squashed from years of grappling. Battulga won gold at the 1983 World Sambo Championships and also won the World Sambo Cup in 1989. He represented the Mongolian People's Republic in international competition from 1983 to 1990, winning multiple medals at World Championships, World Cup, and Friendship Games. As president, he still trains regularly and was considered the most athletic leader in the world. Battulga shared workout content during his presidency, including shoulder presses with 80-kilogram dumbbells for 30 reps, traditional Mongolian wrestling demonstrations, and a claimed 20-rep set of 840-kilogram leg presses. Battulga's jacked reputation is not myth or propaganda. It is grounded in decades of competitive training, international competition, and continued athletic involvement even as he rose to the highest political office. Among modern presidents, very few can claim both a world-class sports career and a visibly muscular physique while in power. Battulga stands out as one of them. It's interesting to see how some of these leaders got jacked from necessity, like going to war and using their physicality in battle, versus more modern leaders who did so for sport. Perhaps that's a good thing. But what do you think? And which of these leaders do you think was the most jacked? Who do you think would win in a Royal Rumble? Wouldn't that be a sight? And did we miss anyone? Are there any buff leaders that we should have included? Leave a comment down below. And if you're still around, please give us a like and subscribe and do all the good stuff. It really helps the channel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.